Before you close your eyes tonight, take a deep breath and leave the noise of the modern world behind. You're about to journey through time, not with rush, but with calm. These are the forgotten corners of America, lit by lanterns and built by calloused hands. As you drift into sleep, the voices of the 19th century will whisper stories of dusty streets, steam engines, and lives carved into history. Tonight, let your dreams be guided by pioneers, poets, and presidents across Florida, Texas, New York, and beyond. This is not just a video, it's your passage to peaceful sleep.
What if I told you that before Florida became theme parks and highways, it was a wild, waterlogged frontier held together by prayer, grit, and wooden planks? These rare photographs don't just show places. They reveal a forgotten Florida, built by settlers, steamboats, and silent faith. From riverside churches to dusty schoolyards, from the earliest railroads to dockside markets, this is not the Florida on postcards. This is the Florida that remembers. By 1900, Miami was rising fast. After the railway reached the area, tents gave way to brick buildings like those on First Avenue shown here. The Royal Palm Hotel opened with 450 rooms, remarkable for a young town. Miami, once a fishing village, was on its way to becoming the Sunshine State's crown jewel. Key West's sponge market. When shipwreck salvaging declined, Key West turned to a new industry, sponge farming. By 1900, docks like this bustled with maritime harvesters unloading Gulf sponges for daily trade. Merchants picked the best and shipped them north, earning Key West a reputation for producing the finest sponges in North America. Indian River Boat Dock. By 1900, steamboat travel along the Indian River had become a daily ritual. This bustling dock was a lifeline, bringing tourists, mail, and supplies to remote settlements. Dressed in their finest, passengers waited eagerly to board, as Florida's waterways remained its most elegant and essential highways. Indianola Social Club. On the banks of the Indian River, the Indianola Social Club gave Merritt Island settlers a rare place to gather, dance, and connect. Built near modern-day Courtney Parkway, this simple wooden hall stood as proof that even in rugged Florida, community mattered as much as survival. Flagler's Railway reaches Brevard. By 1900, Henry Flagler's East Coast Railway had reached Brevard. Engine number 98, seen here in motion, symbolized Florida's new era, linking remote towns to ports, hotels, and opportunity. Where once there were hammocks and palmettos, the rhythmic thunder of steel signaled the arrival of progress.
Melbourne's first public school. This modest wooden schoolhouse marked the beginning of public education in Melbourne. In 1898, students gathered here under pine trees and hand-me-down books. With one room, one teacher, and endless curiosity, it was a humble start to something lasting, a belief that knowledge could grow even in wild soil. Melbourne's oldest surviving schoolhouse, now restored and located on the campus of Florida Institute of Technology. Spanish-American War. With Cuba just 90 miles away, Florida became a launch pad during the Spanish-American War. This photo shows the transport ship Rio Grande departing Port Tampa with troops, cavalry, and even a balloon crew for aerial scouting. In just weeks, U.S. forces pushed Spain to surrender, reshaping America's role in the world. The treaty oak. This massive live oak in Jacksonville was already ancient by the time this photo was taken. In the 1930s, a reporter saved it from destruction by inventing a legend that a treaty between Spanish settlers and native tribes was signed beneath its branches. The story was false, but the tree survived. Loading oranges. These men are loading crates of oranges onto a river barge, but this photo was taken during a low point in Florida's citrus industry. Devastating frosts in 1894 and 1895 ruined most groves in central Florida. Many farmers gave up, but others moved south and helped rebuild the industry. Welcome to Miami. In 1896, Miami was just a small fishing village until industrialist Henry Flagler extended his railway south from Palm Beach. With help from landowner Julia Tuttle, the train arrived and everything changed. That first steam engine sparked a boom, turning Miami into one of America's favorite destinations.
A street in Key West. By 1895, Key West was Florida's largest city. Once a sleepy island, it boomed thanks to the wrecking trade, salvaging cargo from ships lost off its coast. This busy street scene captures a rare moment of calm in what had become one of America's most profitable maritime outposts. Steamboat on the Ocklawaha River. The Okiamki was one of many paddle steamers cruising the winding Ocklawaha River. It carried cargo, livestock, and curious tourists, including Ulysses S. Grant and Thomas Edison. With 43 years of service, the steamboat became a floating lifeline for riverside communities and a symbol of Florida's frontier charm. Relaxing on the veranda. The Royal Poinciana Hotel in Palm Beach opened modestly, but soon became a grand escape. With room for 1,000 guests and nearly 5 kilometers of corridors, it offered luxury and leisure. These women enjoyed the shaded veranda, just steps away from orchestras, fishing excursions, and the quiet hum of bicycle messengers. The Old City. St. Augustine, founded in 1565, is the oldest continuously inhabited city in the U.S. This photo shows a house on Francis Street built in the early 1700s, once home to a Canary Islander and artilleryman. By the time this image was taken, the house was already over 150 years old. Teeing off. Golf arrived in Florida thanks to Scottish immigrant John Gillespie, who built a 2-hole course in 1886. The sport quickly caught on. Hotels followed suit, adding small courses for their guests. This Palm Beach driving range paved the way for Florida's first full 18-hole course, opened just 2 years later.
A sweet harvest. Florida's sugarcane industry nearly collapsed in the late 1800s due to harsh frosts, but it rebounded, especially in fields south of Lake Okeechobee. As this 1894 photo shows, harvesting cane was tough, back-breaking work, done entirely by hand long before machines took over the sweet task. Bridge on Alligator Creek. This wooden bridge over Alligator Creek was a lifeline through Florida's swampland wilderness. Captured in 1894, it carried settlers, carts, and hopes across palm-shadowed water. Simple but essential, crossings like this connected isolated families to the broader world, one creaky plank at a time. The Plaza Hotel in Rockledge. Tucked behind moss-draped oaks, the Plaza Hotel in Rockledge was a hidden jewel of Florida's early tourism era. From this quiet rear view, it's hard to imagine the elegant guests and orchestra-filled evenings that once filled its halls. Yet this place helped define Florida's rise as a winter escape. Grace Church on Merritt Island. Built along the river's edge, Grace Episcopal Church stood as a symbol of calm and community in 1890. Surrounded by pine trees and reflected in still waters, it brought faith and structure to Florida's untamed frontier, where steamboats docked, settlers prayed, and the wilderness slowly gave way to permanence. Life-saving. Originally created to rescue shipwrecked sailors, the U.S. Life-Saving Service evolved as Florida's beaches grew crowded with tourists. By 1890, lifesavers patrolled shores like Palm Beach using small boats called dories to reach swimmers in trouble, marking the early days of organized beach rescue in the Sunshine State.
Phosphate miners. In the 1890s, Central Florida became a hub for phosphate mining. This valuable rock, used in fertilizer and animal feed, was found in rich deposits near Ocala. Early mines like this one relied on hard labor, but mechanization soon followed, turning Florida into a major player in the global phosphate trade. Road building. It may look like farming, but these men were building roads, by hand, with horses. Before cars, most roads in Florida were rough paths, prone to flooding and mud. Yet they were vital, linking remote inland towns to the outside world, one rutted mile at a time. Sailing on sand. At Ormond and Daytona Beach, thrill-seekers turned bicycles into wind-powered rides. With sails fixed to custom rigs, these sand sailors let adventurous tourists race across the shoreline. It was an early taste of extreme sports, right on the soft sands of Florida's growing beach destinations. Taking a dip. At the lavish Hotel Alcazar, guests didn't just dance and dine. They swam in what was then the world's largest indoor swimming pool. More than just Florida's first indoor swimming pool, it was a symbol of luxury and modern leisure for wealthy visitors escaping the cold northern winters. Hotel Alcazar. Industrialist Henry Flagler, co-founder of Standard Oil, built a railroad down Florida's east coast and grand hotels to go with it. The Hotel Alcazar in St. Augustine was a winter escape for the wealthy, offering luxury, sunshine, and one of the first multi-story concrete structures in America. St. Luke's Church on Merritt Island. Standing quietly on Old Courtney Parkway since 1888, St. Luke's Episcopal Church and its cemetery remain intact today. Surrounded by wild Florida growth, this humble structure became a place of worship and remembrance for generations of settlers carving out life on Merritt Island. St. Mark's Episcopal Church. Built in 1886, St. Mark's Episcopal Church still stands in Cocoa Village today. Its wooden frame and Gothic-style windows echo a time when faith anchored Florida's early communities, offering comfort, tradition, and a gathering place in an otherwise untamed landscape. Paddle steamers and railroads. By 1886, Silver Springs was booming. Steamboats packed with tourists raced for profit, until the railroad brought even more visitors. Competing guides invented a clever twist, a pane of glass in the bottom of a rowboat. It was the world's first glass-bottom tour, offering a glimpse beneath the surface. Palatka. In the late 1800s, Palatka rivaled Jacksonville as a major river port, with 7 steamboat lines serving local plantations. But a massive fire soon devastated its downtown. This photo, capturing an ox cart driver on bustling streets, marks the end of an era before trade shifted south to Jacksonville.
Jacksonville cityscape. By 1885, Jacksonville had grown into a winter haven for nearly 70,000 people, many escaping the cold northern states. Once home to Timucua tribes, then French, Spanish, and British settlers, the city was renamed after Andrew Jackson and became a key stop in Florida's evolving story of growth and migration. Florida's first black school. In Jacksonville, Florida's first school for black children opened in 1869, named after abolitionist Edwin M. Stanton. After 2 fires destroyed earlier buildings, this photo shows the second version, rebuilt in 1882. It stood as a symbol of resilience until a permanent fireproof school was finally built in 1917. Harriet Beecher Stowe. Decades after Uncle Tom's Cabin shook the nation, author Harriet Beecher Stowe settled in a quiet home near Jacksonville. She spent summers here after the Civil War, claiming she never felt hostility from locals. Curious admirers often visited, hoping to glimpse the famed writer sitting peacefully on her porch. Jupiter Lighthouse. By the 1880s, Jupiter Lighthouse had already stood watch for over 25 years. Keeper James Armour served for more than 4 decades, witnessing the inlet evolve from a quiet outpost into a vital hub, connecting rail, steamships, and telegraph lines in Florida's growing role on the world stage. Life in log cabins. In remote parts of Florida, settlers built simple one-room log cabins. No nails, no mortar, just grit and skill. Logs were notched to fit, and mud sealed the gaps. These homes were rough, but sturdy, offering warmth, shelter, and a sense of pride in a hard and self-reliant life.
Alligator hunting. In the 1870s, Silver Springs drew crowds not just for its beauty, but for the thrill of alligator hunting. Tourists boarded steamships to shoot gators from the decks, turning the rivers into a deadly safari. Proud hunters often posed with their kills, turning blood sport into souvenir photographs. The birth of tourism. Before railroads reached Florida, rivers were lifelines. At Silver Springs in Ocala County, merchants moved goods by boat, but the area's wild beauty soon became the real attraction. Stories of crystal-clear waters and exotic wildlife spread fast, turning Silver Springs into Florida's very first tourist destination. Reconstructing Florida. After the Civil War, Florida underwent major changes. Formerly enslaved people were now free. Some stayed to work for their old masters, while others left in search of a new life. This image captures a moment of transition, where hope and hardship walked side by side in the Reconstruction South. Jacksonville Signal Tower. By 1864, Florida was under Union control, but danger still lurked. This 100-foot signal tower near Jacksonville relayed messages to the coast. If Confederate snipers opened fire, the men could retreat to a small shelter just below the top, holding position until reinforcements arrived. Confederate volunteers. This rare 1861 photo shows some of the Florida's earliest Confederate volunteers. Lacking official uniforms or weapons, many brought what they could from home. Over 15,000 Floridians would fight for the South, and these men from Pensacola's Navy Yard were among the very first to enlist.
They didn't know they were building history. They were just trying to survive, worship, teach their children, and reach the next town before sundown. But in doing so, plank by plank, sermon by sermon, crop by crop, they laid the quiet foundation of modern Florida. These images aren't just windows into the past. They're mirrors showing us what resilience, hope, and humble beginnings truly look like. And in the silence of these photos, Florida still speaks.
What if you could walk a single street and witness the entire story of Texas unfold? From dusty wooden shops that vanished in fire to grand capitals rising from the plains, these photos don't just show the past. They reveal how a raw frontier became a living legend. One block, one family, one parade at a time. Rough Riders Parade, San Antonio. In 1898, the Rough Riders assembled in San Antonio for a parade that echoed with pride and purpose. Flags waved, horses lined the streets, and citizens filled every balcony. It was more than a military display. It was Texas declaring itself ready for the world stage. Courage wasn't a rumor here. It was visible. Alamo Plaza. By 1898, Alamo Plaza had become a modern crossroads. Streetcars, carriages, telegraph poles, and pedestrians converging in organized chaos. The Hugo and Schmelzer building looms above, commerce humming below. Once the site of revolution, now the stage of routine. Texas hadn't forgotten its past. It had simply learned how to move forward. Smithson and Harris Sign Shop in Dallas. In 1896, the Smithson and Harris Sign Shop in Dallas painted more than just words. It shaped identities. With bold letters, brick walls, and proud craftsmen, this photo captures a Texas stepping into branding, business, and permanence. Signs told people where they were. These men told the world who they were. San Antonio Steam Laundry. In the heart of San Antonio around 1895,
The steam laundry offered modern convenience on 4 wheels. Horse-drawn delivery wagons lined up with precision, branding proudly displayed. Clean clothes, clean lines, and clean ambition. This wasn't just laundry. It was progress dressed in cotton and horsepower.
Texas state capital, Austin. By 1895, the Texas state capitol towered over Austin, proud, vast, and built from the dreams of a young state. In front, a simple wagon and its riders remind us, even as marble rose, the people remained grounded. This wasn't just government, it was Texas, written in stone and soul. Judge Roy Bean with cyclists, Langtree. In the dusty town of Langtree, around 1895, the legendary Judge Roy Bean stands among a crowd, including early bicyclists and local families. His saloon courtroom behind him, bicycles beside him, Bean seems caught between 2 worlds, the outlaw West he ruled and the modern age rolling in on 2 wheels. San Antonio Street, New Brownsville. By 1895, San Antonio Street in New Brownsville reflected a new era. Sidewalks, store windows, and second-story balconies framed a town no longer frontier, but thriving. Carriages moved slowly past quiet shops, and the wildness of the West gave space to routine. This was Texas, dressed for the 20th century. The Bryson family, Liberty Hill. Taken in 1894, this portrait of the Bryson family is more than a portrait. It's a legacy. Generations gather in front of their home, some standing proud, others seated in silence. In their eyes, the story of the land. Hardship, faith, unity. This is how Texas was truly built, together.
Moving a hotel across the plains. In 1893, towns weren't just built, they were moved. This photo shows a full hotel being relocated from Dimmitt to Plainview by teams of horses and raw determination. Dust swirls, wagons strain, and a new Texas rises, not with blueprints, but with rope, wheels, and willpower. XIT Ranch, Channing. At the vast XIT Ranch in 1892, cowboys take a break beside their chuck wagon. Coffee pots, hats tilted, and horses in the distance tell the story without words. This was life on the range, raw, rhythmic, and ruled by sun, dust, and grit. No clock, just duty and horizon. Lovers Retreat, Lone Camp. Tucked between cliffs and trees in 1892, this quiet corner of Lone Camp was known as Lovers Retreat. Women in dresses gather by the stream, some seated, some hidden in shadow. It's a rare moment of softness in the rough Texas landscape, where even wild hearts pause to feel peace. Bicycle riders in San Antonio. In 1892, a new kind of wheel rolled through Texas. These young men posed proudly with their bicycles in front of a local grocery beneath a bold ad for iron tonic. Gone were the horses, at least for now. The frontier spirit remained, but its rhythm was picking up speed.
6th Street Rail Construction, Austin. On Austin's 6th Street around 1890, men worked beneath the Texas sun, laying tracks that would carry the city into a new era. Shops advertised candy, boots, and dentistry, signs of comfort growing beside the clang of progress. Here, the frontier gave way to foundation, and the future was being built by hand. Historic downtown Bastrop. By 1890, Bastrop's downtown echoed more with footsteps than hoofbeats. Brick facades, awnings, and electric poles lined the streets. Quiet signs of civilization settling in. No gunfights, no cattle drives, just routine. But in this stillness, a new Texas was rising, one built not by legends, but by everyday lives. Sweetwater Saloon.
Outside the Sweetwater Saloon around 1890, these men posed with grit and swagger, the dust still fresh on their boots. 5-cent beer, tilted hats, and worn-out railings paint the true face of frontier fellowship. This wasn't just a bar, it was a refuge, a ritual, and a rite of passage. Cowboys at the end of a cattle drive. Around 1890 in Amarillo, these cowboys posed atop a train car celebrating the end of a long, dusty cattle drive. Boots off, hats raised, laughter in the air. This was their victory lap. A moment of pride frozen in time where iron rails met raw grit and the West tipped its hat.
Snowman in Fort Worth. In Fort Worth, 1889, a rare Texas snowfall became a family memory. Gathered proudly around a massive and slightly eerie snowman, this group reminds us that even in the dust and heat of frontier life, there was laughter, winter magic, and the timeless joy of simply being together. Congress Avenue, Austin. On Congress Avenue, around 1888, a marching band parades past storefronts advertising oysters and game. Horse-drawn carriages share the street with onlookers in bowler hats. Captured by S.B. Hill, this moment blends music, movement, and civic pride, showing a Texas that was no longer frontier, but already capital. The modern school, Stephenville. In 1886, education rose from stone in Stephenville. This modern school, with its tall windows and serious facade, stands proudly behind a sea of children, boys in boots, girls in bows. It's more than a building, it's a declaration. The next Texas wouldn't just ride or fight, it would think. John Campbell Ranch. At the John Campbell Ranch in 1886, a family gathers by a wooden gate, framed by trees and quiet land. The porch stretches wide under the Texas sun, a symbol of simple living and deep roots. Here, the frontier wasn't battles or towns, it was home, and home was everything. Bauer & Co., Pleasanton. In Pleasanton, 1886, Bauer & Co. stood tall with its stone walls and shaded porch, part general store, part community anchor. Signs for shoes and goods hint at a growing town meeting everyday needs. This wasn't just a business, it was where handshakes sealed deals and neighbors became family. Chili stands, San Antonio. Long before food trucks, San Antonio's plazas sizzled with open-air chili stands. Around 1885, women known as chili queens served spicy bowls from wagons and makeshift tables, filling the air with heat and flavor. This photo captures more than a market, it preserves the birth of a Texan culinary legend. Skirmish near Fort Hancock. Amid the rugged terrain of West Texas, this 1885 photograph captures a violent clash between U.S. cavalry and Native Americans. Smoke rises between rocks and riders as history unfolds in gunfire. These were moments of fear, survival, and loss, reminders of the deep conflict that shaped the Southwest's painful birth. Dallas Firefighters, Central Station. In front of Dallas's Central Fire Station, these men in crisp uniforms pose with pride beside an early fire engine. It's around 1885, and the city is growing fast, and so is its need for order, safety, and service. These firefighters were more than responders. They were guardians of a rising metropolis. Town Square, Honeygrove. Honeygrove's town square in 1885 buzzed with wagons, horses, and hand-painted signs. Dozens gathered to trade, talk, and stock up at the local druggist or mercantile. In this dusty maze of commerce and conversation, you could feel it. A small town becoming a stronghold of civilization on the prairie. Concho Street, San Angelo. In 1884, Concho Street in San Angelo was a hive of wagons, storefronts, and dust. Signs for blacksmiths, grocers, and saloons lined the road, while the plains stretched endlessly beyond. This wasn't just a street, it was the spine of a growing town, stitched together by grit,
trade, and sunlight. Downtown San Antonio. San Antonio's downtown in 1880 brims with storefronts, saloons, and awnings casting striped shadows. A child stands alone in the mud-lined street as carriages pass and signs advertise whiskey and wool. Captured by F. Hardesty, this photo freezes a moment when the Wild West began wearing a city's face. El Paso with Franklin Mountains. In 1880, El Paso stood quiet but determined beneath the looming Franklin Mountains. Wooden storefronts line a dusty street where horses and wagons pause in the shadow of stone giants. Here, the city met the desert and commerce met nature. A frontier town carved between peaks and promise.
Commerce Street Bridge, San Antonio. In 1880, San Antonio's Commerce Street Bridge bustled with horse-drawn carriages and Victorian storefronts. The bold riverside sign stands tall, marking a city on the rise. Iron met river, and progress rolled on wheels. This was no longer a frontier, it was a gateway to the modern South. Empire Livery and Sale Stable, Austin. Captured in Austin around 1880, this photo shows the Empire Livery and Sale Stable, a hub for horses, carriages, and commerce. Men in hats stand proudly beside polished wagons, while others tend to the animals that powered the city. Before engines roared, this is where Austin's movement began. Herman Meyer's blacksmith shop. Outside a wooden shop in Cistern, Texas, Herman Meyer and his crew pose beside a horse-drawn carriage. It's 1878, and every village depends on men like these, forging wheels, fixing shoes, keeping the frontier moving. This wasn't just a blacksmith shop, it was the heartbeat of rural Texas. Buffalo hunters at their camp in Texas. In the harsh wilds of Texas, 1877, a group of buffalo hunters rests by their wagon. The fire burns low, rifles lean on branches, and the prairie stretches endlessly behind them. These men weren't chasing glory, only survival, hides, and meat. This was the edge of the frontier, and they lived on it.
Houston Street, Fort Worth. Houston Street in 1876 buzzed with boots, bonnets, and business. The Sun Store stands proudly, flanked by wooden storefronts and curious townsfolk posing for posterity. Horse-drawn wagons line the dusty road, as electric poles hint at a modern future. Fort Worth was no longer a frontier, it was becoming a city. Old Capitol, Austin, funeral of Governor Hamilton. On April 12, 1875, crowds gathered at the old Texas Capitol in Austin to mourn Governor Andrew Jackson Hamilton, a Union loyalist in a post-war South. The domed building stands solemn as carriages line the hill, flags at half-mast. In this moment, Texas remembered not just a man, but a complicated legacy. Main Street, first photo of Dallas. In 1872, Dallas's Main Street was a dusty corridor of wooden storefronts and handwritten signs. Wagons lined the unpaved road, and business names like Lobenstein Hides, Wool, and Peltries fill the frame with frontier character. It wasn't polished, but it was alive. A city not yet finished, but fully in motion. Main Plaza, San Antonio. In 1872, San Antonio's Main Plaza bustled with wagons, horses, and handwritten shop signs. La Mexicana and San Antonio Bazaar hint at the city's blend of cultures. Dirt streets and wooden wheels marked progress, slow, steady, and pulled by hooves. Here, the Old West wasn't myth, it was Monday.
Market Day in San Antonio. This vibrant 1870 scene captures Market Day in San Antonio, a city pulsing with life. Ox-drawn wagons line the square, men in wide hats haggle over goods, and the stone church watches silently in the background. It's not just commerce, it's culture, grit, and survival woven into every trade. Washington Bullock's house. Captured in post-Civil War Texas, this photo shows the stately brick home of Washington Bullock in Bethel. The porch, lined with solemn figures, reflects a time of quiet recovery and frontier dignity. Behind the picket fence, life moves slowly, but with purpose, in a land still finding its future. Alamo Plaza. This view of Alamo Plaza in 1866 shows a quiet frontier town slowly awakening after the Civil War. Wooden buildings and wagons rest under a hazy sky, while sparse fences hint at past battles and a still untamed land. San Antonio was rebuilding, one porch, one path, one prayer at a time. The Alamo. This rare photograph captures the Alamo Mission in San Antonio around 1860, just decades after the legendary 1836 battle. The chapel stands weathered yet resilient, silent witness to a fight that defined Texas independence. This image preserves a sacred space before restoration, still surrounded by everyday frontier life.
The 300 block of Main Street, Houston. In 1856, Houston's 300 block of Main Street was a row of wooden storefronts captured in what is believed to be the city's oldest surviving photograph. Just a decade later, after fire swept through the area, sturdy brick buildings rose in their place, a signal of rebirth and permanence. Fast forward to today, and this same block hums with modern life, neon signs and rail lines. From dust to steel, from horses to headlights, Main Street didn't just survive, it evolved. First photo of the Alamo. Taken just 13 years after the Battle of the Alamo, this 1849 daguerreotype is one of the earliest known photographs of the site. Faint figures stand before the crumbling facade, unaware they're becoming part of history. The image radiates silence, as if the ground still echoed with the cries of 1836.
Texas wasn't built in silence. It was forged in fire, parades, prayers, and muddy streets. These photographs aren't just windows into the past. They're mirrors of endurance, family, and grit. The dust is settled, the horses are gone, but the spirit, it's still here, riding every rail, echoing down every main street. And now, it's part of your memory too.
What if you could time travel across an entire state, one photograph at a time? Before New York was highways and headlines, it was forests, farms, forgotten towns, and hopes written in dust. These rare images don't just capture a place, they reveal the soul of a people carving their future across hills, rivers, and muddy roads. From the springs of Saratoga to the markets of Albany, from quiet villages to the seeds of cities, you're not just seeing New York's past, you're stepping into the heartbeat of early America. The Great Snow Hall, New York. After a brutal storm, horse-drawn wagons line up to clear Manhattan's streets. Piled high with snow, they head toward the East River, where the icy burden is cast into the water. It's organized chaos, steam, hoofbeats, and hard labor, all to make the city walkable again. After the blizzard, New York. Following one of the fiercest snowstorms in city history, workers dump tons of frozen white into the river. Horse-drawn carts tilt backward as men shovel relentlessly. In the distance, smokestacks blur into the icy haze. It's winter cleanup, 19th century style, raw, cold, and absolutely necessary for survival. East 87th Street, Manhattan. In a quiet backyard between Madison and Park Avenues, a young girl clutches a washboard and water pump. Wooden homes and makeshift sheds form the backdrop of working-class life. Her smile softens the hardship, a rare moment of innocence in a New York neighborhood still untouched by steel and stone. Buckman's Well, northern Manhattan. Long before high-rises, Buckman's Well served as a quiet lifeline between 181st and 182nd Streets. This spring offered fresh water and respite along Haven Lane, nestled near today's Riverside Drive. Surrounded by rock, wood, and stillness,
It was a forgotten oasis in what would become the city's restless north. The Bronx, untamed. Long before the borough bustled with life, the Bronx was a patchwork of rivers, rocks, and quiet fields. A primitive crane stands near the water, suggesting early construction or farming efforts. This serene glimpse captures a moment before urban sprawl replaced the wild beauty of New York's northern frontier. Eastern Broadway under construction. A team of men carves a path for what would become one of Brooklyn's most iconic boulevards. Shovels in hand, surrounded by dirt and wooden planks, they laid more than just a road. They laid history. Behind them, homes watch quietly as New York's modern skeleton begins to take shape.
Milk wagon on Park Row, New York City. Crowds gather as the milk wagon makes its daily stop on Park Row. Pulled by a patient horse, it delivers fresh milk and buttermilk to a bustling newspaper district. In a time before refrigeration, this scene was essential, bringing nourishment to the city's core, one bottle and coin at a time. Handsome cab driver, New York City. Poised beside his trusted horse, this cabman waited for his next fare on cobbled streets. Dressed in wool and duty, he bridged the city's old world and new pace. With reins in hand and stories untold, he was a quiet witness to thousands of lives passing through Manhattan's heart. Herald Square, New York City. Before it became a shopping mecca, Herald Square was the pulse of Manhattan's news world. The towering New York Herald building commanded attention, surrounded by horse-drawn traffic, iron rail lines, and tidy trees. A snapshot of organized chaos, modernity rising, block by block, in America's fastest-growing city. Grand Central Hotel, New York City. Standing tall in the heart of Manhattan, the Grand Central Hotel embodied New York's Gilded Age ambition. Its ornate facade and rooftop flags reflected luxury and prestige. Nestled beside the Southern Hotel, this corner bustled with carriages, commerce, and the unmistakable rhythm of a city on the rise.
Staten Island Ferry, New York City. In elegant hats and coats, passengers quietly read their newspapers aboard the Staten Island Ferry. Sunlight pours through tall windows, illuminating a rare moment of calm in a rapidly changing New York. This peaceful crossing captures both the grace and routine of urban life at the close of the century. Broadway, New York City. Broadway pulses with life as carriages, streetcars, and pedestrians fill the street. American flags wave above the storefronts of a rising metropolis. In this snapshot of New York's unstoppable growth, every window, wheel, and sign tells a story of commerce, ambition, and a city coming into its own. Squatters on Fifth Avenue. Before Fifth Avenue became a symbol of wealth, it held pockets of poverty like this. Makeshift shacks built from scrap wood show the harsh conditions many faced. These forgotten corners remind us that New York's glamour was built atop grit, struggle, and the resilience of invisible lives. Fifth Avenue and 118th Street. Exposed bedrock supports a growing residential block. The contrast between raw nature and modest homes behind a white fence captures a city in transition. Before concrete and skyscrapers, New York was quite literally a city rising from the stone, street by street, foundation by foundation.
Keuka Lake Vineyard Estate. Perched above the shimmering waters of Keuka Lake, this grand estate stood among the famed vineyards of New York's Finger Lakes. Even in 1894, the region's beauty was undeniable. Rolling hills, serene waters, and fruitful vines capturing the charm that continues to define one of America's most picturesque wine regions. Fourth Lake Serenity. Two steamboats approach the wooden dock on Fourth Lake, carrying passengers eager for nature's calm embrace. Surrounded by rolling hills and tranquil waters, this peaceful moment captures the timeless allure of boat rides in New York's wilderness, where silence, breeze, and scenic beauty blend into a cherished American ritual. New York City Hall. Bathed in sunlight and framed by thick trees, City Hall stands with commanding elegance. Built in 1812, this structure is one of the oldest continuously used city halls in the United States. In 1893, its symmetrical facade and lofty tower symbolized a growing city's ambition to govern a modern world. Columbus Circle. This striking view shows Columbus Circle during its early years, alive with trolleys, carriages, and a sea of pedestrians. The dense crowd gathered likely for a civic event or parade. Behind them, Central Park looms quietly. It's a rare look at how public space once brought the entire city together.
Angel over the waters. New Yorkers gather around Bethesda Fountain beneath the iconic angel sculpted by Emma Stebbins. The statue's outstretched wings and lily branch bless the tranquil lake behind her. Representing purity, health, and peace, she stands as a silent guardian while people stroll and linger at the mall's northern end. Elegance in the park. On a crisp afternoon in Central Park, New Yorkers promenade beneath leafless elms along the mall. Gentlemen in bowler hats and women in long skirts create a tableau of refinement. This scene captures the city's heartbeat, where class, calm, and community converged in nature's corridor, even before the skyline soared. Staten Island Tennis Club, St. George. Long before tennis became a television spectacle, it was a genteel pastime for the well-dressed elite. Captured here on Staten Island in the peaceful borough of St. George, these young men and women pose with wooden rackets and proud smiles, frozen in a summer that no longer exists. A stroll through Mott Street. In the heart of Manhattan's Chinatown, Mott Street captures a moment of quiet bustle. Men in bowler hats pass by storefronts with striped awnings as women and children linger on stoops. It's a rare, sunlit glimpse into daily life before the city's vertical race transformed the skyline forever. Corner of State and Broadway, Albany. This photograph captures a quiet moment on one of Albany's busiest intersections at the time, the corner of State Street and Broadway. Streetcars run calmly beneath a web of overhead wires as horse-drawn wagons share the road with early signs of modernization. These buildings once marked the pulse of New York's capital, where merchants, travelers, and politicians crossed paths daily. Before the Flatiron. Long before the iconic wedge-shaped Flatiron building redefined this corner, 23rd Street and Broadway bustled with carriages, trolleys, and crowds. The streets were alive with the rhythm of old New York, horses clattering on cobblestone, vendors calling out, and massive painted signs towering above it all. This was the city's pulse and motion, captured just before the skyline would change forever. The Dakota rises. In this photo, the Dakota apartment building stands proudly over an unfinished New York. Horse-drawn wagons cross dirt roads, and Central Park West is still raw earth and rock. This wasn't just a construction site, it was a symbol of ambition. The Dakota brought opulence uptown, marking a turning point where Manhattan's wild edge began its transformation into the city we know today. The L in Lower Manhattan, steel above the streets. Before the subways ruled New York, the city looked to the skies. The elevated railway, the L, sliced through Manhattan like a mechanical serpent, its shadow stretching over cobblestone streets and bustling crowds. It was noisy, gritty, and utterly revolutionary, lifting New York's future one iron beam at a time.
Bandits Roost, New York's forgotten alley. This wasn't just a street, it was a warning. Captured by Jakob Riis, this alley in Mulberry Bend was known not for its address, but for its reputation. The men stare back at the camera, not with fear, but familiarity. In this corner of 19th century Manhattan, danger didn't hide, it posed. The Great Blizzard of 1888, Madison Avenue. Towering walls of snow swallowed the city whole. This surreal canyon on Madison Avenue wasn't carved by time, but by storm. In March 1888, New York stood still, paralyzed by nature's fury. And yet this man stood casually against it, like winter had dared him to flinch. Building 81st Street. Massive rocks once blocked the way where 81st Street now runs. In 1886, teams of horses and brave laborers cleared the stone by hand and pulley. It was backbreaking work, dangerous, loud, and slow. Today, few imagine that every paved block in Manhattan began with scenes like this. The newspaper girl. With poise beyond her years, she stands beneath the elevated tracks, a bundle of newspapers in hand, and a flowered hat like a crown. Her smile defies the noise of the city. In an age of headlines and hardship, she became the story, grit wrapped in grace on a New York street.
Statue of Liberty Assembly. Freshly arrived from France, the Statue of Liberty was assembled piece by piece in New York. This rare photo shows workers inside the massive workshop preparing the iconic torch-bearing arm. A symbol of freedom in the making, captured before it ever stood watch over the New York harbor. Where Broadway meets Amsterdam. Long before the traffic and theaters, this quiet fork was more farmland than metropolis. In 1883, the intersection of Broadway and Amsterdam Avenue was a peaceful junction where unpaved roads met open fields, a place where Manhattan still breathed like a village on the edge of change. Carnegie Hill, before the mansions, just dirt and dreams. Captured in 1882, this early view of Carnegie Hill shows empty plots and narrow roads carving through the rugged landscape. Decades before luxury townhouses defined the area, this photo reveals a neighborhood on the brink of transformation, raw, untamed, and waiting for New York's upper crust to arrive. Adirondack cabin life. This family portrait in Johnsburg, New York, captures more than faces. It freezes resilience. Their long cabin, built by hand, stood against brutal winters and backbreaking labor. Notice the game displayed with pride and the solemn strength in their posture. This was survival in the Adirondacks, raw, quiet, and deeply American.
Farmhouse in Manhattan. It's almost unthinkable now, but this quiet farmhouse once stood where 84th Street and Broadway collide in today's Manhattan. Perched on a rocky rise, it overlooked dirt roads in open land. Long before skyscrapers and subways, this was New York, rural, rugged, and waiting for the thunder of progress. Jerome Mansion, the gilded elegance of New York. This stately corner structure once belonged to Leonard W. Jerome, grandfather of Winston Churchill. Built in an era of opulence, the mansion overlooked Madison Square Park and symbolized the rise of New York's elite. Its architecture, with ornate windows and sharp mansard roofs, reflected ambition carved into stone. Baxter Street, Manhattan. This gritty scene from Baxter Street captures the raw face of old New York. Wooden shacks clinging to the shadow of brick tenements, laundry fluttering from windows, and children dodging horses on the dusty road. Here, survival wasn't romantic. It was loud, crowded, and unfiltered, a sliver of life carved into a growing empire. New York Times Building. Before it became a global media giant, the New York Times was headquartered here, an ornate corner building buzzing with printers, editors, and ink-stained ambition. The bold signage declared a rising empire of words, while carriages passed by, unaware they were watching the birth of modern journalism unfold brick by brick.
Brooklyn Bridge begins. Seen from Manhattan, the towering stone towers of the Brooklyn Bridge rise from the East River, still incomplete but full of promise. Sailing ships anchor below as the city hums with ambition.
This moment captures New York mid-transformation, between old-world charm and the bold age of steel. Wall Street, New York. A quiet Wall Street before the rush of the modern stock market. The spire of Trinity Church stands tall at the end of the street, framed by early skyscrapers and gas lamps. This photo captures a moment of calm before the financial capital of the world came to life. Going to the cane grinding, Merrick. This faded photo captures a joyful moment frozen in time. Families in Sunday best packed onto a wooden wagon heading to a cane grinding. The horse waits patiently beneath a moss-covered tree as if knowing it's part of a cherished ritual. It's not just a ride, it's a memory on wheels. 106th Street and 8th Avenue, Manhattan under construction. Before the skyline, there was stone. This 1869 photo captures a rugged view of northern Manhattan where dynamite and manpower carved out the city's future. Jagged rock, makeshift huts, and early cranes tell a story of ambition. New York was being built one blasted hillside at a time.
Lincoln's funeral procession, New York City. As the nation mourned Lincoln, two small faces peered from a second-story window, 6-year-old Theodore Roosevelt and his brother Elliot. The street below was crowded with solemn figures, but history quietly paused in that window. A boy who would one day shape America, watching the man who had just saved it. High Rock Spring, Saratoga Springs. This photo captures a moment at the legendary High Rock Spring, once believed by Native Americans to hold healing powers. By the 1800s, its fame drew visitors from across the nation. Here, a man taps into its mineral waters not just for refreshment, but for health and hope. Nature's medicine bottled by history. African Americans collecting bones of soldiers. In the silent aftermath of war, these men were tasked with an unthinkable duty, gathering the forgotten remains of fallen soldiers at Cold Harbor. Under the weight of sorrow and history, they worked not just with their hands, but with reverence. This haunting photo captures grief, duty, and quiet resilience. Church of the Holy Trinity, future site of Grand Central Terminal. Before the rush of trains and steel stood this quiet wooden chapel. The Church of the Holy Trinity occupied the very ground where Grand Central Terminal would one day rise. This photo captures a fleeting moment, humble, sacred, and soon to vanish in the name of progress.
Central Park, view from 8th Avenue. Before the trees grew tall and the paths were paved, Central Park looked like a construction site. A lone shack stands before the rising park landscape, hinting at the transformation to come. This is New York caught between wilderness and ambition, just beginning to shape its iconic urban oasis. The 5th Avenue Hotel. Before skyscrapers ruled Manhattan, this was the city's crown jewel. The 5th Avenue Hotel stood as a beacon of luxury and innovation, one of the first buildings in New York with an elevator. Presidents stayed here, power deals happened here, and in this rare photo, you're looking at the heartbeat of elite New York. Barnum's American Museum. Long before Times Square lit up the night, this building drew crowds like a magnet. Barnum's American Museum was part circus, part classroom, and entirely unforgettable. From wax figures to the Fiji mermaid, it was New York's strangest wonderland. This photo captures it alive, just 7 years before it burned to the ground. New York City street under construction. This striking image captures Manhattan mid-transformation. Muddy roads, scattered bricks, and horse-drawn carts share space with rising facades. It's one of the earliest street views of NYC ever photographed, freezing a moment when ambition and chaos walked hand in hand. The city wasn't yet iconic, but it was becoming unforgettable.
Manhattan's Upper West Side, the first known photo of New York City. This quiet hilltop view is more than a glimpse into Manhattan's past. It's the first known photograph ever taken of New York City. Long before the skyline rose, the Upper West Side was a tranquil mound dotted with trees and whispers of farmland.
This is where the photographic memory of a great city began. Niagara Falls, the first witness of a giant. Before camera shutters became common, someone dared to aim a lens at the eternal roar of Niagara Falls. Framed by mist and silence, this is the first photograph ever captured of the site. Notice the lone figure, so small against the vastness, yet bold enough to freeze the unthinkable. Time paused here for the first time, and a legend took shape. And now, as the dust settles on these frozen memories, we remember that New York was never just a place, it was a promise. A land of contrasts and chances, of quiet barns and roaring ideas. These images, though silent, still speak. Of families who built without knowing what they were building. Of towns that dreamed bigger than their maps allowed. If these images moved you, share them. Let the echoes of early New York ripple forward. Because history isn't just about what happened, it's about who remembers.
What if you could walk through California before the highways, before the film sets, before the Silicon Valley dreams? These are not just photographs, they are time machines. From gold miners and dusty saloons to the first glimpse of San Francisco's bones, these 44 images will change how you see everything.
Sackett Hotel and Emporium, Hollywood. Before Hollywood became myth, it was wood and willpower. The Sackett Hotel stood as the area's first landmark, 3 stories of ambition on dusty Prospect Avenue. Beneath its mansard roof, travelers found rest and locals sent letters from the town's first post office. This was Hollywood, before it knew its name. First telephone pay station, Los Angeles. Long before smartphones, a call to San Francisco cost 50 cents per minute. This was the first telephone pay station in Los Angeles, tucked behind bold signage promising local and long-distance connections. For a brief moment, voices could leap cities, powered by wires, hope, and a rising California. A.P. Pepeshi, cabinet maker, Los Angeles. In front of a bustling workshop on Los Angeles Street, a cabinet maker's wagon waits, horses steady, wheels caked in dust. A.P. Pepeshi's sign offers fine carpentry and shelving, a testament to craftsmanship in a city just awakening. Behind every ornate storefront stood hands that shaped California's early elegance. Meeker Sawmill, Sebastopol, Sonoma County. In the dense redwood forests of Sonoma, the Meeker Sawmill breathes smoke into the sky, its saws slicing timber that would build a rising California. Water runs below, trees loom above, and men labor inside. This was frontier industry, harsh, raw, and vital to the state's push toward modernity. First car in Los Angeles. 2 men in hats sit proudly in a horseless carriage, rolling through dusty Los Angeles roads in 1897. This was the city's first car, a marvel of gears and vision. Still unfamiliar, still uncanny, it hinted at a future that would soon roar across California and never slow down. Friends at a picnic. In the quiet hills of Mendocino, friends gather for a rustic picnic, their expressions caught between curiosity and pride. Horses stand behind them, loyal companions on untamed trails. The women's dresses and men's sturdy coats tell of a life built on resilience, where leisure was a rare treasure. Barry's Sawmill at Freezeout Creek. Deep in the redwood country of Sonoma, Barry's Sawmill hummed with life and sawdust. Dozens of men stand beside loaded wagons, their labor shaping California's wooden bones. At Freezeout Creek, every log milled was a step toward modernity, timber transformed into homes, towns, and the backbone of a growing state. Loggers and a giant fallen tree. Towering above the forest floor, this silent titan is a silent witness to California's early logging boom. A ladder leans against its colossal trunk, dwarfed by nature's scale. These pioneers didn't just cut trees, they carved futures, towns, and fortunes from the heartwood of ancient giants.
Redondo Beach Pier and Hotel View. In the golden haze of the 1890s, Redondo Beach bustled with maritime energy. Dock hands moved with purpose, sails stretched to the breeze, and the Grand Hotel loomed in the distance. This coastal scene marked California's shift from rugged frontier to a blossoming paradise at the edge of the Pacific. Miners' boarding house, Buckeye. Tucked in the hills of Plumas County, this boarding house sheltered the dreams and dust of gold miners. Faces weathered by labor gather for the camera, flanked by pine and perseverance. Their world was rough, but brotherhood ran deep. Each board in that house held the weight of hope and hardship. 5th Street, looking north, San Diego. San Diego's 5th Street stretched toward tomorrow, its streetcars rattling through dust and ambition. Ornate facades marked a city rising fast, where commerce met coastline and opportunity called from every corner. This was California on the brink, still quiet, still young, but already dreaming of becoming something far greater. Looking east from Hotel del Coronado, San Diego. From the grand verandas of Hotel del Coronado, the Pacific horizon melted into golden sands and winding piers. Bathe houses and seaside shacks dotted the shoreline, whispering of vacationers and entrepreneurs drawn by the promise of sea air and sunshine. It was elegance at the edge of the American frontier.
South Figueroa at 6th Street, Los Angeles. Before the sprawl and smog, South Figueroa was a showcase of Victorian elegance. Towering gables, ornate spires, and manicured hedges lined this quiet boulevard. These grand homes echoed the dreams of a rising elite, men and women who believed Los Angeles would one day rival the great cities of the East. Meeker's Sawmill, Sebastopol. In the heart of Sonoma's redwood country, Meeker's Sawmill roared with the sound of industry. Giant circular blades carved the future from fallen giants. Men posed between shifts, stoic, proud, and coated in sawdust. This was California's backbone: timber, sweat, and the rhythm of progress echoing through the forest canopy. Georgian Seminary, Hewitt. Under the dome of the Georgian Seminary, knowledge echoed in Armenian and English. Built with striking symmetry and crowned with a lantern tower, the seminary stood as a cultural lighthouse. In 1890, students gathered beneath leafless trees, hopeful minds preparing to shape faith, thought, and identity in a new land. The stump of a giant sequoia tree, Fieldbrook. Dozens of people stand and sit atop the enormous stump of a fallen sequoia tree, once among the largest trees on Earth. Taken in 1890 in Fieldbrook, California, this haunting image captures the scale of nature and humanity's ambition at a time when logging reshaped entire landscapes for progress.
A view of downtown Sacramento. Bustling with horse-drawn carriages and early electric lines, Sacramento's streets in 1890 reveal a city on the cusp of modernity. Brick facades and ornate arches echo Victorian ambition, while unpaved roads remind us of a frontier still settling. Here, California's capital buzzed with trade, dreams, and westward momentum. Inside a bar at the Table Bluff Hotel and Saloon. Among bear rugs and antler chairs, 4 men pose inside a rustic bar filled with trophies of the wild. Bottles line the back wall, while mounted animals and portraits crowd the space. It's not just a saloon, it's a frontier museum of whiskey, wilderness, and pride. Interior, Consolidated National Bank. A cathedral of finance, carved in wood and shadow.
Intricate arches and towering teller cages transform this San Diego bank into something almost sacred. Quiet and grand, the space evokes reverence, where business felt like ritual and trust was guarded behind iron and mahogany. A sanctuary for early capital. Looking west, Point Loma in right distance. Neat homes line dusty paths in early San Diego, framed by groves of trees and a gentle coastline on the horizon. The serenity of this growing town belies the transformation underway. Far in the distance, Point Loma stands watch, quiet and eternal, as civilization steadily claims the western frontier.
French's Mill. Nestled in the forested hills of Guerneville, French's Mill bustles with activity. Workers pose beside freshly cut timber, steam equipment, and a towering water tank. This was more than a workplace. It was survival in wood and smoke. The mill fed California's growth one log at a time through grit and grit alone. Guerneville Office, Guerneville. This isn't just a group photo, it's a portrait of California's backbone. Dozens of workers pose outside the mill office, tough from labor, united by purpose, boots worn, hats tipped, hands calloused. Each face tells a chapter of sweat, sawdust, and survival. This was the heart of Guerneville's timber era, frozen in time. Alturas Main Street, Modoc County. Before paved roads and neon signs, this was California commerce. Wooden storefronts, dirt roads, and horse-drawn wagons. Alturas bustled quietly in its own rhythm. Shopkeepers, townsfolk, and travelers crossing paths in a town where every step kicked up history. It's a forgotten heartbeat of the Old West, still echoing in silence. Redwood logging in Northern California. Before chainsaws and bulldozers, it was muscle and misery that brought these giants down. Here, 5 loggers pose mid-fell on a redwood so massive it seems otherworldly. With only handsaws and grit, they carved California's destiny, one tree at a time. Every ring in that trunk holds a century of silence, broken by the echo of men chasing progress.
San Francisco Bay, the edge of a new world. A still moment before the storm of the 20th century. Smoke from steamships curls above the bay, while sailboats glide beside progress. The warehouses lining the docks whisper of gold, grit, and ambition. In the distance, an untouched island watches silently as San Francisco begins to rise, its destiny unfolding across these restless waters. Napa State Hospital, California's silent citadel. Standing like a Gothic castle in the California hills, this was once the front line of mental health reform. Built with hope and brick, Napa State Hospital promised a new kind of care: sunlight, structure, and dignity. Behind its imposing towers, thousands sought healing during a time when science still wrestled with the soul. Los Angeles before the boom. Before Hollywood lights or freeway sprawl, this was Los Angeles, a dusty stretch of wooden homes, empty roads, and wide hills. The photo freezes a rare moment when the city was still a quiet settlement, not yet the icon of ambition and reinvention it would soon become. Los Angeles at the crossroads. At the corner of Spring and First, progress meets grit. A blacksmith shop, a wooden windmill, and a horse-drawn wagon stand as testaments to a working town on the edge of change. This isn't just a street scene. It's the pulse of a city preparing to rise.
Woodward's Gardens, San Francisco. Before Golden Gate Park, there was this, a cultural wonderland in the heart of San Francisco. Woodward's Gardens blended zoo, museum, aquarium, and theater in one sweeping vision. Behind its ornate gates, Victorians marveled at science, art, and nature, proof that the West wasn't just wild, it was curious. The Bella Union Hotel, Los Angeles. This wasn't just a hotel, It was the gathering spot of early Los Angeles. The Belly Union hosted governors, generals, and gossip. In this rare shot, a brass band plays before a curious crowd, horses line the street, and history lingers on the balconies. Here, the Wild West dressed up for city life. Vernal Falls, Yosemite Valley. Frozen in time by the lens of Edward Muybridge, this image captures the untamed majesty of Vernal Falls before Yosemite became a household name. The thunder of falling water, the towering cliffs, and the dense pine forest, this was California in its purest, wildest form. Old Sacramento, steamboats and streets. A bustling waterfront in Sacramento where horse-drawn wagons shared the road with steamboat passengers. The massive paddle wheel of the Yosemite looms in the background, promising passage into California's interior. It's a rare glimpse into the heartbeat of 19th century trade where steam met soil and the West was still being won.
Courthouse and Blaze's Saloon, Wocodot, now Nevada City. Perched atop the hillside, the Grand Courthouse, built in 1865, presides over a wild frontier town. Below, Blaze's Saloon marks the social center of a place where justice and whiskey shared the same street. The dirt road, wooden facades, and scattered figures paint a raw portrait of early Californian law and life. Yolo Brewery, Main and Court Streets. Before craft beers had names and neon signs, there was Yolo Brewery, a proud brick building in the heart of rural California. Its shaded porch welcomed locals for a drink and a break from hard labor. The figures posed in front seemed to carry the stoic strength of a new town in the making, brewed from sweat, hops, and hope. Water Wheel in Xenia Madre, Los Angeles. This massive wooden water wheel was more than a machine. It was the pulse of early Los Angeles. Drawing water from the Xenia Madre, it powered agriculture, quenched thirst, and sustained life in a growing frontier. Its quiet turning marked the rhythm of survival in a dry land turning fertile. Los Angeles Plaza. Before skyscrapers and freeways, this was the heart of Los Angeles. A dusty square surrounded by modest buildings where horses outnumbered people, and the future of a great metropolis was still just a whisper in the wind. This is where LA took its first civic breath.
Old Fort Humboldt. Perched on California's northern edge, Old Fort Humboldt once kept silent watch over the frontier. This lone soldier stands in a quiet clearing surrounded by simple wooden quarters. It's a glimpse into a time when rugged isolation met duty, and the line between wilderness and civilization was still being drawn. The first staff of Levi Strauss Company. In this powerful portrait, the original Levi Strauss team poses with quiet pride. Their denim work aprons and rough hands speak of labor and ambition. Captured in 1853, this moment marks the beginning of a brand that would soon become a symbol of American resilience and style, born from the gold rush grit. Gold miners at Spanish Flat, Napa. In this early glimpse of California's gold rush, 4 determined men work the land with pickaxes and sluice boxes, while a boy watches from a wagon. The promise of fortune hangs in the air, but so does the weight of labor. This photo captures the raw hope and harsh reality of the gold fever era.
Portsmouth Square, San Francisco during the gold rush. This early daguerreotype captures Portsmouth Square in 1851, San Francisco's beating heart during the gold rush. Wooden storefronts rise against the hills, freshly carved from the wilderness. What feels like a still moment is actually a storm of ambition, each window hiding stories of risk, reinvention, and the promise of gold. Shoes Daguerrean Saloon, San Francisco. Before permanent studios, photography came on wheels. This image shows Shoes Daguerrean Saloon, a traveling photo wagon parked in San Francisco in 1851. Mounted on rail wheels, it offered portraits to a booming city.
Here, the gold rush wasn't just about gold, it was about capturing new identities in a rapidly changing world. Women and men in the California gold rush. Amid the chaos of pickaxes and pans, this rare photograph reveals something unexpected: a woman in the thick of California's gold rush. Flanked by determined men, she holds her own beside the sluice. This image challenges the myth that the goldfields were a man's world alone. The oldest known photograph of San Francisco. This faded daguerreotype is more than a cityscape, it's a time capsule. Taken in 1850, it's the earliest known photo of San Francisco, just 2 years after California became a state. The skyline is a patchwork of rooftops, wooden structures, and a foggy sense of ambition rising with the gold boom.
The gold is long gone, the railroads repainted, the faces forgotten. Yet in these shadows of silver and sepia, California still breathes. Each frame whispers a truth, that even empires begin with wooden porches, quiet plazas, and hopeful stairs. We don't just see the past, we inherit it, one shutter click at a time.
What if the oldest streets could speak? What would they tell us? Of riots, fires, love, and loss frozen in time. In this video, we don't just show you photos, we invite you to walk through them. Because Illinois didn't begin with steel and speed, it began with stories, now uncovered again. The river that burned. In April 1899, the unthinkable happened. The Chicago River caught fire. Oily sludge on the surface ignited, sending flames 50 feet high. The Kinzie Street Bridge and a nearby railroad bridge were engulfed. Firefighters battled the inferno while smoke rose like a warning. Chicago was growing fast, but not without cost. Michigan Avenue's Sacred Mile. A quiet moment on Michigan Avenue in 1899 captures Chicago's spiritual skyline. Church spires pierce the sky, lining the peaceful, tree-framed street. Horse-drawn carriages move slowly past towering stone sanctuaries. It's a portrait of reverence and ambition, a city balancing its booming industry with solemn spaces for the soul. Montgomery Ward fights for Chicago's lakefront. In 1898, industrialist Montgomery Ward launched a bold campaign to keep Chicago's lakefront free and open to the public. This photo shows the contested site where developers wanted to build an exposition hall. Ward's vision? A lakefront without walls, forever open, clear, and free. A battle for beauty and access. State Street, the beating heart of Chicago. In 1997, State Street pulsed with energy. Horse-drawn streetcars rumbled through the city's commercial hub, while pedestrians filled the sidewalks beneath ornate awnings and towering brick facades. Signs like "Fair" loomed overhead, hinting at the booming retail culture. This was Chicago becoming the Midwest's modern metropolis, fast, bold, and bustling.
The tugboat Binghamton passes the Adams Street swing bridge. Around 1895, the industrial heartbeat of Chicago echoed along the river. The tugboat Binghamton cut through the water, trailing black smoke between brick giants and steel bridges. Debris lined the waterfront, a sign of rapid expansion. This was Chicago in motion, a city building itself, one shipment and one bridge at a time. Chicago World's Columbian Exposition. In 1893, Chicago unveiled a dream, the World's Columbian Exposition, also known as the White City. Gleaming neoclassical buildings rose beside tranquil lagoons, welcoming visitors from around the globe. It wasn't just a fair, it was a declaration that out of fire and ashes, Chicago could imagine beauty and build it. Ferris wheel at the World's Columbian Exposition. Towering 264 feet above the fairgrounds, the first ever Ferris wheel was Chicago's bold answer to the Eiffel Tower. Built for the 1893 World's Columbian Exposition, it wasn't just a ride, it was a statement.
Every revolution carried dreams skyward, proving America's imagination had no ceiling. Inside the Hall of Wonders at the Columbian Exposition. Beneath cowering arches and a sea of flags, visitors in 1893 wandered the grand exhibit halls of the world's Columbian Exposition. It was a world within a world where nations, inventions, and dreams converged. For many Americans, this was their first glimpse of global wonder, all under one majestic roof.
Birth of the elevated loop in Chicago. On Valentine's Day, 1893, Chicago took a leap skyward. This photo captures the early construction of the iconic elevated loop downtown, a tangle of beams and ambition. It marked the beginning of a new chapter in urban transport, forever shaping the city's skyline and the rhythm of its streets below. Suffragists march in DeKalb. In a bold display of resolve, women marched proudly through DeKalb during a Decoration Day parade in 1892. Clad in long dresses and clutching flags, these suffragists were not merely commemorating the fallen, they were staking their claim in history, one step at a time, on the road to the vote. Art Institute of Chicago begins to rise. On February 6, 1892, a $325,000 contract launched the construction of the now iconic Art Institute of Chicago. Backed by ambitious plans and major fundraising, the project replaced the old Industrial Exposition Building, marking a cultural turning point for the city's lakefront and for its artistic legacy. Calls to lower the lakefront rails. In early 1891, the Chicago Daily Tribune pressed for a bold civic change, lowering the Illinois Central Railroad tracks along the lakefront. Their vision? A clear, open view of Lake Michigan, free access for all, and a grand boulevard stretching from the heart of the city to the water's edge.
Chicago's first electric streetcar. In 1890, Chicago entered a new era of transportation with the introduction of its first electric streetcar. Sleek, quiet, and modern for its time, this innovation replaced horse-drawn trolleys and began reshaping daily life in the growing metropolis. It marked the beginning of a faster, cleaner urban commute. Steamship crash at Rush Street Bridge. On September 20, 1889, chaos erupted as the steamship E.P. Wilbur crashed into the closed Rush Street Bridge. Miscommunication between captain and engineer led to 5,000 tons of steel colliding with morning commuters. Horses panicked, workers scattered, and the bridge warped under impact. Another dramatic episode on the turbulent Chicago River. Chicago's Federal Building faces early trouble. Completed in 1880, Chicago's Federal Building was already showing serious flaws by 1886. Though grand in design, its immense weight strained the unstable ground beneath it. Cracks formed, floors sunk, and rats scurried through hollow upper walls. A proud neoclassical symbol was quickly becoming a cautionary tale of poor planning. Inside Chicago's tenements, squalor hidden in plain sight. On July 26, 1885, a Chicago Tribune reporter followed Health Inspector DeWolf through the city's worst tenements. Families crammed into 12-foot rooms, children languished on broken chairs, and despair hung in the air. Behind decaying walls, lives unfolded in silence, forgotten by progress, yet never far from its towering shadow.
Towers of Grain, Chicago's hidden economic engine. In 1885, towering grain elevators redefined Chicago's role in the global economy. What began in 1851 with horse-powered lifts evolved into massive steam-driven warehouses by the riverfront. These buildings stored millions of bushels, quietly fueling the rise of the futures market and transforming the city into a grain empire. Rose Hill Station, where the city meets the tracks. Captured in 1885,
This image shows passengers gathered at Rose Hill Station in Chicago, a quiet yet crucial hub in the city's expanding rail network. Men in coats and women in bonnets wait calmly under telegraph poles, symbols of a connected future. Life paused here between steam whistles and wooden platforms. Lakefront Park, a tramp's paradise. Photographed in 1883, this peaceful stretch of Lakefront Park in Chicago hides a deeper reality. Known then as a haven for the city's homeless, the park offered solitude, secrecy, and survival. Figures lay hidden in the shadows, some by choice, some by circumstance, wrapped in coats under the sky, dreaming of warmth and dignity. Randolph Street Market, Chicago. Captured in 1880, this bustling image of Randolph Street reveals a thriving marketplace where horse-drawn wagons overflow with produce and goods. Crowds of merchants and customers navigate the narrow space between stalls as buildings rise stoically in the background. It's a vivid portrait of Chicago's early commercial heartbeat, gritty, alive, and full of motion.
Chicago Academy of Fine Arts. This photograph from 1879 captures the austere grandeur of the Chicago Academy of Fine Arts, standing proudly along a nearly empty boulevard. Horse-drawn carriages and pedestrians pass the imposing stone building, which reflects the city's early cultural ambitions. Long before skyscrapers, this structure embodied Chicago's belief in beauty, education, and permanence. Michigan Avenue, beauty or champion mud puddle. This 1877 image captures Michigan Avenue at a time when beauty was in the eye of the beholder. Lined with elegant buildings and orderly trees, the scene suggests charm, yet critics of the day mocked it as a mud puddle with a bad top dressing. Horse-drawn carriages, walkers, and the wide path evoke the early struggle between civic pride and practical infrastructure. The battle for Chicago's lakefront. This 1872 view shows Michigan Avenue before the skyline took shape, when the city's dreams clashed with railroad power. With horse-drawn carriages rolling along and pedestrians strolling past rows of trees, the scene looks calm, but behind it, a heated political struggle brewed. Citizens opposed railroads, claiming prized lakefront land. This quiet image hides the fierce debates that shaped modern Chicago.
The Great Chicago Fire began. On the night of October 8, 1871, a small blaze in a barn on DeKoven Street turned into one of the most devastating urban fires in American history. Fueled by dry weather, wooden buildings, and strong winds, the flames spread uncontrollably across the city. In less than 48 hours, over 3 square miles of Chicago were reduced to ashes. Legend blames Mrs. O'Leary's cow for kicking over a lantern, but the real cause was a city unprepared for disaster. As church bells melted and entire blocks collapsed, thousands ran for their lives while firefighters battled hopelessly against the inferno. By the time the fire died out, more than 17,000 buildings were gone, 100,000 people were left homeless, and over 300 lives were lost. The heart of Chicago, its businesses, churches, homes, and even its courthouse was gone. But from the ashes rose something greater, a rebirth. Architects, investors, and laborers from across the country poured in to rebuild the city. Steel, stone, and vision replaced wood and chaos. The fire didn't just destroy, it transformed. Chicago would never be the same, and in many ways, it became stronger. The skyline we know today began in the ruins of 1871.
Playing with a monkey. In a quiet street of Bloomington, Illinois, a small monkey on a leash steals the spotlight. Children gather with cautious smiles while a woman gently leans in, curious. The scene feels both strange and endearing, an odd moment of joy, captured in the middle of post-Civil War America. Lincoln's funeral train leaves Chicago. Under a towering arch of mourning, Abraham Lincoln's body departs Chicago on the journey to Springfield.
15 young women in white and black stand silently as thousands gather in reverence. Drawn by black horses, the funeral car moves slowly, solemn, heavy, final. A nation grieves as one era comes to an end. Rush Street gets a new bridge. In the early days of Chicago's rapid growth, crossing the river was no easy task. On February 3, 1864, a new bridge on Rush Street was opened to pedestrians and teamsters, connecting the bustling north and south sides of the city. The previous bridge, built in 1857, had tragically collapsed under the weight of cattle, resulting in multiple fatalities. Rush Street Bridge collapsed under a herd of cattle. It was just after 5 p.m. when tragedy struck the Rush Street Bridge. 100 head of cattle were being herded across, led by drovers and a horse-drawn wagon, when a replacement bridge tender, reportedly untrained, swung the bridge open mid-crossing. In a horrifying moment, the north half of the bridge gave way, snapping and crashing into the icy river.
Camp Douglas turns into a prison of misery. In early 1862, Camp Douglas in Chicago was emptied of Union troops and repurposed into a prison camp for thousands of Confederate soldiers. By the end of the war, over 26,000 men had passed through its gates. Many never left. Originally a training ground, the camp quickly earned a grim reputation. Overcrowding, poor sanitation, and harsh weather turned it into a death trap. Sherman House, Chicago's hotel of power. Before skyscrapers ruled the skyline, the Sherman House was the epicenter of elegance and influence in Chicago. Built in 1858, it stood proudly at the corner of Clark and Randolph, welcoming politicians, performers, and power brokers from all corners of the country. Flames on South Water Street. At 4 a.m. on October 19, 1857, fire erupted from a brick store and swept through one of Chicago's wealthiest business districts. Within hours, the blaze had devoured 6 entire blocks, turning marble storefronts and priceless stock into smoke and ash. 23 souls perished, including firemen and those trapped by fate or profession.
Lager beer and blood on Clark Street. On a chilly April morning in 1855, German and Irish workers rose not just for rest, but for protest. A new mayor had tripled liquor license fees and banned Sunday tavern hours, igniting fury across Chicago's immigrant communities. When arrests followed, the people marched. Behind them, the rage of laborers, robbed of their only day of peace. The oldest photo ever taken of Chicago. Before skyscrapers pierced the sky and the Great Fire reshaped everything, this is what Chicago looked like. Captured in 1855, this image shows the Cook County Courthouse and City Hall, quiet, sturdy, unaware of its doomed fate in 1871. It's the city's earliest known photograph, and it feels like a whisper from another world. No cars, no noise, just a moment suspended in sepia before the storm of progress arrived. The first steam horse of Illinois. This was more than metal and steam, it was the beginning of movement. In 1852, the Galena and Chicago Union Railroad rolled out its pioneer locomotive, carving through the prairies with a promise of prosperity. It wasn't sleek or fast by modern standards, but to Illinoisans of the mid-19th century, it was a roaring symbol of progress.
History never really disappears. It just waits, buried in dust, in silence, in photographs like these. These images aren't just glimpses of a forgotten past. They are mirrors held up to our present. And as you leave this journey through time, remember, what we preserve today becomes the memory someone finds tomorrow.
What if the spirit of Georgia could be captured not in words, but in shadows of the past? In this video, we uncover the earliest known images of Georgia, moments carved in silver, preserved through war, rebirth, and railroads. These photos don't just show history, they whisper it.
Atlanta City Center. Horse-drawn wagons line the dirt-covered streets of downtown Atlanta, moving slowly past brick buildings and telegraph poles. Railroad tracks cut through the intersection, marking the city's progress. Once burned to the ground, Atlanta rose again, this time with commerce, courage, and the quiet determination of a South rebuilding from its scars. Tech Tower and Shop, Georgia Tech. This quiet view captures Georgia Tech's iconic Tech Tower and its adjacent shop building as they stood in 1899. Photographed from Cherry Street, the scene reflects the early ambition of a young school on the rise. Empty tracks, bare trees, and the tower's spire foreshadow the industrial century ahead. Hurricane flood in Brunswick. A powerful storm surge from a hurricane slammed Cumberland Island and flooded Brunswick streets. Newcastle Street vanished beneath dark waters, reflecting the city's Gothic clock tower. Silent figures waded through a drowned downtown where shops became islands. Nature reminded Georgia that even brick and stone were no match for wind and tide. Piedmont Park, Atlanta. A small boat glides across the lake at Piedmont Park, where Atlanta hosted the Grand Cotton States Exposition. The Atlanta Brewing Company Pavilion rises behind, crowned by its signature barrel. Flags wave, columns gleam, and the scene captures a city eager to show the world its strength, elegance, and Southern rebirth.
Liberty Bell at the Atlanta Exposition. School children from Atlanta pose proudly beside the Liberty Bell during the 1895 Cotton States Exposition. Brought from Philadelphia, the bell symbolized unity in a city rebuilding its identity. Their dresses, smiles, and posture capture a hopeful South, celebrating progress, patriotism, and the power of shared history under one iconic American relic. Whitehall Street, Atlanta. Horse-drawn wagons move along Whitehall Street, today's Peachtree Street, as telephone poles rise like sentinels of progress. Cobbled pavement and iron tracks run between brick storefronts, capturing the pulse of a southern city reborn. In this photo, Atlanta isn't racing forward, it's steadily reclaiming its place. Strolling through Piedmont Park. A lone figure ascends the stone steps of Piedmont Park, surrounded by classical statues and ornate pavilions. The 1895 Cotton States Exposition transformed this space into a stage of Southern pride. Behind the man, architecture inspired by Europe rises, Atlanta dreaming big, cloaked in marble, ambition, and the echo of empire. Lake Abana, Grant Park. Women in bonnets and gentlemen in suits gather by Lake Abana for a day of leisure in Atlanta's Grant Park. Children paddle wooden boats, laughter echoes beneath the boathouse, and Southern charm drifts across the water. It's a portrait of peace, before radios, highways, or screens. Just people, trees, and stillness.
Downtown Atlanta from above. From the rooftop of the Equitable Building, Atlanta unfolds in brick and ambition. The Capitol rises at the city's heart, its dome watching over steeples and smoke. This skyline tells a story, not of steel and glass, but of rebirth, politics, and pride in a city determined never to be forgotten. Grady Hospital, Atlanta. A horse-drawn ambulance waits outside Grady Hospital, Atlanta's lifeline in an era before modern emergency care. Opened just months earlier, the facility stood as a beacon of progress in public health. Behind the wheels and hooves, the South was learning to heal not only wounds, but also the legacy of hardship. 5 Points, Atlanta. Mules, carts, rubble, and railways converge in the heart of Atlanta. 5 Points, 1892. Men in hats dodge construction zones, children weave through the dust, and wooden scaffolds rise among brick giants. This was the pulse of a rebuilding South, restless, expanding, and carving new streets through the scars of history. Brunswick dockyards. Towering masts line the waterfront as barrels wait to be loaded aboard ships at the Downing Company docks in Brunswick. This was Georgia's link to the world. Molasses, lumber, and naval stores flowed through these ports. Amid salt air and creaking wood, industry thrived where the land kissed the Atlantic.
Hampton Terrace Hotel, Augusta. Once hailed as the South's grandest resort, the Hampton Terrace Hotel stood like a palace above Augusta. With its towers, balconies, and sweeping porches, it welcomed elite guests from across America. Built for luxury, it symbolized Georgia's aspirations, where Magnolia charm met Gilded Age grandeur in perfect architectural harmony. Alabama Street, Atlanta. Cobblestone streets stretched toward the horizon as horse-drawn wagons passed storefronts and shadowy alleyways. On Alabama Street, near Pryor, downtown Atlanta hums with energy. Telegraph poles march in rows, and electric lights hang like promises. It's a city in transition, balancing Southern roots with the steel pulse of tomorrow. Downtown Atlanta rising. Atlanta stretches outward in brick and smoke, its downtown brimming with warehouses, rooftops, and restless ambition. Trains whistle, chimneys roar, and streets pulse with movement. From above, it's clear. This isn't a southern town anymore, but a city staking its claim on the future, one steel rail and smokestack at a time. Spelman College, Atlanta. Hundreds of young black women gather outside the old barracks, the new home of Spelman College in 1883. In a time of division and exclusion, this campus rose as a sanctuary of education and dignity. Each figure in the frame is a quiet revolution, learning, dreaming, and daring to redefine the future.
Peachtree Street, Atlanta. A streetcar rumbles past shop fronts and saloons on Peachtree Street near 5 Points in 1882. Signs shout for whiskey and real estate, while shadows stretch from brick facades. This was Atlanta's beating heart, where horses, trolleys, and hustlers shared the road, and every cobblestone echoed the sound of a city awakening. Dahlonega Mint, Georgia. Long after the gold rush faded, the Dahlonega Mint stood tall in the Georgia hills. Built to turn raw ore into national currency, it now hosted cadets in uniform, echoes of discipline where miners once dreamed of fortune. Here, money and memory were both forged in Southern stone. Peachtree Street, Atlanta. Wagons rolled down dusty Peachtree Street, flanked by hardware stores, bookstores, and fading signs of reconstruction. Atlanta in 1875 was a frontier of rebirth, raw, restless, and rebuilding. Between iron rails and brick walls, the city whispered a promise. The ashes were gone, but the fire to rise had just begun. Atlanta Roundhouse ruins. Steam engines idle beside shattered brick walls, the skeletal remains of Atlanta's roundhouse in 1866. Bombed, burned, and broken, this was the beating heart of a southern city left to ashes. Yet even in ruin, the tracks remain. From this rebel, Atlanta would rise, not just rebuilt, but redefined.
Decatur Street, Atlanta. Muddy, battered, and occupied, Decatur Street in 1864 was less a road than a scar. Union troops and supply wagons line the sidewalks while hoofprints vanish into the sludge. Atlanta hadn't yet burned, but the air was heavy with war. This was the storm's eye, quiet, brown, and waiting to explode. Peachtree Street in ruins. Once a bustling artery, Peachtree Street stands fractured in 1864. Charred walls and empty windows stare blankly at the dirt tracks below. The saloon still bears its name, but laughter is long gone. This was Atlanta in ashes, stripped of pretense, bracing for the fire Sherman promised was still to come. Railroad yards, Atlanta. Steam rises from wood-fed engines as workers swarm Atlanta's vital rail hub. Crates, tracks, and cannon-fed urgency dominate the scene. In 1864, these rails were lifelines, feeding the war, driving supply, shaping history. Months later, Sherman would torch it all. But here, the machine still breathes, loud and unstoppable. Wagon train leaving Atlanta. Dozens of covered wagons snake through the mud, pulling families, soldiers, and silence from a doomed Atlanta. The rail yard looms behind, soon to be flames. This was the end before the fire, when the city emptied itself, one creaking wheel at a time, toward an unknown future under Sherman's shadow.
Wagon train on Whitehall Street. Whitehall Street heaves beneath the wheels of retreat. Covered wagons trail dust through Atlanta's commercial core, past banks and stores about to fall silent. It's not a parade, it's an exodus. The rails underfoot once brought progress, now they echo loss. The city wasn't gone yet, but its heartbeat was fading. Destroying the railroad before evacuation. Union soldiers pry up Atlanta's iron veins, twisting rails into useless wreckage. Smoke hangs low as men swing tools against steel, not to build, but to erase. This wasn't just destruction, it was strategy. With every splintered tie, Atlanta slipped further into silence, becoming memory before the last boot marched out. Union Station in ruins, Atlanta. Wood splinters, bricks collapse, smoke lingers. Atlanta's first Union Station lies in ruin, scorched by Sherman's march. Where once trains thundered, silence settles. It wasn't just a depot, it was a symbol. In destroying it, the Union severed more than rails, they severed pride, strategy, and the spirit of a burning city. Roundhouse, Chattanooga Railroad, Atlanta. Circular like an industrial cathedral, this roundhouse housed the engines that powered the South. Its fan-like rails radiated from the heart of Atlanta's rail empire. In 1864, it was more than infrastructure. It was a target. Soon, its iron ribs would echo with the sounds of Union fire and falling brick. Defending the Etowah River, Georgia. Perched above the Etowah River, cannons lie in wait, silent but ominous. This view captures a Civil War earthwork fortification guarding a vital railroad bridge, the kind of target that could tip the tide of a campaign. A moment of uneasy calm before conflict returned to these hills. Rome, Georgia. Captured in the fall of 1864, this rare panoramic image of Rome, Georgia, was taken during the Union Army's occupation in the final stages of the Civil War. The photo, attributed to Union photographer George M. Barnard, shows the convergence of the Etowah and Ostanala rivers in the foreground, forming the Coosa River. Confederate ironclad Atlanta captured. The CSS Atlanta, pride of the Confederacy, sits silent after her capture on the James River. Built in Savannah and named for Georgia's capital, she embodied Southern defiance. Now under Union control, her cannons rest cold, another symbol of how even steel and resolve could not turn the tide of war. Whitehall Street, Atlanta. Before the fire, before the exodus, Whitehall Street pulsed with commerce and conversation. Storefronts stood proud, signs beckoned buyers, and shadows fell gently across brick and dirt. Atlanta in the early 1860s was growing fast, unaware of the storm coming. In this frame, the city still breathes, untouched and unsuspecting.
Stone Mountain, Georgia. Quiet and blurred by time, the Stone Mountain Depot stood as a frontier link between Madison and Atlanta. Built in 1857, it served a growing Georgia, one train, one crate, one passenger at a time. Before war, before fire,
the South still moved on rails and hopeful anticipation. Bremen's Street View, Georgia's oldest known photo. Bathed in fog and early silence, this cobblestone street in Bremen captures a world on the brink of change. Horse-drawn carriages, gas-lit windows, and distant church spires reflect a town untouched by war or wires. This is Georgia's oldest surviving glimpse, time frozen before industry shattered the quiet. What you saw were not just pictures, they were echoes. Georgia's soil has soaked in struggle, witnessed resilience, and bloomed again with hope. In every cracked wall and quiet street, the soul of a state survived. The lens may be silent now, but Georgia's past still speaks, frame by frame.
What if you could step into the dusty streets of 1890 Colorado and witness the raw birth of towns, trades, and legends? These aren't just photos. They're frozen echoes of pioneers, saloons, and railroads. Before the highways, before the noise, this was the soul of Colorado, captured forever.
Rocky Mountain Joe's Place, Boulder, 1900. At the corner of Pearl and Arapahoe Streets in Boulder, a photography studio became a local legend. Rocky Mountain Joe captured Colorado in images that still echo today as relics of a vanished world. In this photo, the West beats silently, forever etched into brick and dreams. Eureka, Colorado, 1900. In a valley carved by time and ambition, Eureka stands quietly beneath the towering San Juan Mountains. Wooden buildings line the dusty street like relics frozen in place. 5 men walk toward the unknown, backs to the camera, while a child runs free in the foreground, unaware that this moment will become history. It's a town on the edge of promise, surrounded by silence and stone. Pikes Peak from Colorado Springs, 1899. The mighty Pikes Peak rises like a crown above the growing town of Colorado Springs. In the foreground, leafless trees frame the quiet evidence of frontier life. Wooden carts, rustic shelters, and open plains. This moment captures both isolation and hope as a young town dares to grow in the shadow of the Rockies. Canyon of the Rio Las Animas, 1899. A narrow railroad track curves alongside the rushing waters of the Rio Las Animas, squeezed between towering canyon walls and the shadows of the San Juan Mountains. Nature roars on one side, steel ambition on the other. This image captures Colorado's wild beauty colliding with human determination, untamed, unforgiving, unforgettable.
Lake San Cristobal, 1898. Bathed in pastel tones, Lake San Cristobal rests like a turquoise jewel cradled by rugged mountains. Reflections ripple across the glassy water as evergreens lean in close, whispering secrets only the Rockies would know. This is Colorado in its purest form, untouched, unscripted, and breathtaking in its solitude. Pioneer Merchant, 1898. A makeshift wooden shop stands proudly in the sun-drenched dust of the Colorado frontier, offering boots, hats, and hope. The sign above reads Headquarters, but it's more than that. It's a symbol of grit. Here, every sale is survival, and every customer a fellow dreamer chasing gold, land, or destiny. Snowwork Year Breckenridge, 1898. Smoke billows like a storm cloud as a rotary snowplow battles the icy wrath of Boreas Pass. Men stand resolute on snowy banks, their silhouettes stark against the white abyss. Here, the mountain doesn't yield easily. Every foot of cleared track is carved by fire, steel, and sheer human will. Union Station, Denver, 1895. Before engines roared and skylines soared, Denver pulsed with horse hooves and wooden wheels. Union Station stands proudly in the haze, its clock tower watching over a swarm of wagons, smoke, and life in motion. A city rising from dust and dreams on the cusp of modernity.
Breckenridge from Shock Hill, 1895. Captured by Otto Westermann around 1895, this elevated view from Shock Hill reveals Breckenridge as a mountain tapestry stretched between snow-capped peaks and pine-covered slopes. The town spreads like a quilt stitched by miners and merchants, all drawn to the promise buried beneath the Rockies. Boulder, flood of 1894. The year the waters rose and tore through Boulder like a forgotten wrath. Trees snapped, homes vanished, and silence followed the roar. This rare photograph captures more than destruction. It reveals a town stunned, a landscape rewritten, and a people forever changed by nature's sudden, merciless hand. Primitive Saloon, Creed, 1892. This wasn't just a tent, it was a temple of tales. Miners, gamblers, and drifters found shade and stories beneath its canvas. Children wandered past, wide-eyed at the laughter, danger, and dust. In this raw corner of Colorado, civilization began with whiskey, friendship, and one crooked wooden sign that read, Saloon. Aspen, Colorado, 1890. Dust rises from the dirt road as a woman crosses with purpose and a boy watches from the center, unaware he's standing in history. Storefronts and telegraph poles line the growing town, while distant figures blur into the haze of a mining boom. This was Aspen before the fame, raw, rising, and restless.
Don't be frightened, old Jenny. Aspen, 1890. A man leads his pack mule up a winding mountain trail. Two small children ride in wooden carriers, clinging to the beast's back while the city of Aspen fades into the valley below. Old Jenny, the faithful mule, carries more than a load. She carries trust, survival, and a sliver of the frontier dream. Gold miners at their cabin, Dillon, 1890. Nestled among aspens, 6 rugged men pose in front of their self-built cabin. It's not luxury, it's survival. Logs, stones, and ambition hold the structure together. These were gold miners chasing a dream, pausing for a rare moment of stillness. Their silence echoes louder than any gold rush legend ever told. Abo and Lewis Livery, Morrison, 1890. With a massive rock as a backdrop, this wooden stable represents the backbone of transportation in 19th century Colorado. Horses, wagons, and men lined up proudly in front of the carriage house show that behind every journey lay sweat, horseshoes, and untold stories. Stagecoaches and freight wagons on the road, Cripple Creek, 1890. Amid the dust and ravines of Cripple Creek, a line of stagecoaches and wagons snakes along trails carved into the mountains. These vehicles were more than transportation. They were the vital link between dreams and survival. The road was long, but the promise of gold made every mile worthwhile.
The Otto Mears Toll Road, 1888. Carved into sheer cliffs above yawning canyons, the Otto Mears Toll Road was more than a path, it was a dare. In this image from 1888, men and mules cling to the edge of civilization, forging onward with courage and grit. One wrong step meant the end, and yet they pressed on. Sunset, Colorado, 1886. Perched 8,000 feet above sea level, Sunset was once a mining dream tucked between the hills. In this photo, time holds its breath. The scattered cabins, the winding paths, the towering pines, all whisper of a town that once burned with promise. Today, only memories echo through these quiet slopes. Boulder Panorama, 1882. From the foothills of Mapleton, Boulder stretches wide beneath the Colorado sun. This sweeping view, captured by J.B. Sturtevant, reveals a young town emerging from the frontier. Wooden homes, dirt roads, and a skyline still shaped more by nature than ambition. Behind it all, the Flatirons stand eternal, watching history unfold. Pikes Peak Avenue, Colorado Springs, 1880. A quiet moment beneath the towering presence of Pikes Peak. Two figures stand in the stillness of a wide, unpaved avenue, framed by rows of trees and distant mountain silence. This is Colorado Springs at the dawn of settlement, a place where nature, ambition, and serenity briefly held hands.
Pioneers on the Move, 1880. Along a rugged Colorado trail, families venture into the unknown, their lives packed into wooden wagons and horse-drawn carriages. With mountains rising behind them and the future stretched out ahead, this image captures not just travel, but transition. A moment frozen in dust, hope, and the stubborn spirit of the American frontier. Colorado Springs from above, 1879. Seen from a high vantage point, downtown Colorado Springs spreads out with ambition and symmetry. Wooden homes, dirt roads, and tidy plots reflect a frontier town in the making, still young, but already dreaming big. This snapshot captures a place poised between wilderness and civilization, just as the rails and roads began to shape its destiny. Leadville begins, 1877. In this early view of Leadville, wooden cabins and rugged pines frame a town not yet aware of its destiny. Just 2 years later, it would rise to become Colorado's most vital mining hub. The air feels still, but history was already rumbling beneath the dirt streets and timber walls. Marshall, Colorado, 1870. Before paved roads and saloons, there were tents and timber. This early photo of Marshall captures a settlement just beginning to take root. Wooden frame buildings side by side with makeshift canvas homes. In the soft haze of dawn, you can almost hear the quiet hope of a town waiting to be born.
Larimer Street under construction, Denver, 1870. This is where Denver began to dream big. Captured around 1870, this image of Larimer Street shows a city rising from the dust, storefronts newly raised, streets still unpaved, and people walking toward a future they were building with their own hands. You could almost hear the hammers and hope echoing through time. Wagon train on Market Street, 1869. In the heart of Denver, 1869, a wagon train forms a rugged circle on Market Street. Horses wait, drivers prepare, and life moves under canvas tops. The scene captures a frontier in motion, commerce, courage, and the slow, steady rhythm of a city being born from dust. Cheney's Chicago Saloon and Hotel, Golden, 1868. At the dusty crossroads of 11th and Washington and Golden, this saloon stood as a beacon for miners, gamblers, and drifters chasing fortune. The year was 1868, and the frontier pulsed with possibility. Beneath its wooden awning, stories were traded, deals were struck, and the spirit of the Old West found a place to rest. Georgetown, Colorado, nestled in the Rockies, 1867. In this wide-angle view from 1867, Georgetown appears cradled by the rugged Rockies like a forgotten jewel. A billow of smoke from a distant train cuts through the silence, marking the arrival of industry in a town still rooted in the old ways.
Earliest known photograph of Boulder, 1866. This 1866 image is considered the earliest known photo of Boulder. Captured by Joseph B. Sturdivant, it shows Pearl Street in its infancy, just 7 years after settlers officially founded the town. In the foreground stands the Colorado House Hotel, while small wood frame shops and dirt streets fill the frame. Group of Scouts and Native Americans, 1865. In this powerful photograph from around 1865, a long row of Scouts and Native Americans sit shoulder to shoulder on a dusty street of a frontier town. Their expressions are unreadable, their clothing a mix of military and tribal garments, an uneasy alliance captured in sepia tones. Holliday's Overland Stage Office, Denver, 1865. At the edge of a growing frontier, this photograph captures a moment of departure. A stagecoach stands ready outside the Holiday Overland Mail and Express Company building in Denver, its horses restless, drivers firm at their post. In 1865, these wagons were the arteries of America's westward expansion. The Great Flood, Denver, 1864. On May 19, 1864, the streets of Denver were no longer streets, they were rivers. Captured in haunting clarity, this photo shows residents surveying the destruction as muddy waters carve through their fragile frontier town. Structures lean, debris scatters, and people stand motionless, bearing witness to nature's fury.
Denver in 1864, a city in its infancy. This rare photo captures the young city of Denver in 1864 at the corner of 15th and Arapahoe. Rows of wooden homes and early storefronts sprawl across the plains, anchored by the brick church built just 4 years earlier in 1860. The horizon is open, the roads still raw, and yet the promise of a great American city pulses beneath the dust. Central City, Colorado, 1862. Cradled in the mountains, Central City surged with miners chasing veins of gold. Cabins and shanties spill down the hillside like a frozen avalanche of ambition. This photo reveals a town etched into stone and snow, raw, rising, and relentless in its hunger for fortune. 15th Street, Denver, a glimpse of 1861 commerce. This bustling stretch of 15th Street in 1861 reveals a city taking root. Storefronts announce names like Voorhees, Watches and Jewelry, and First National Bank, while a lone barber pole stands as a symbol of daily life. Horse-drawn buggies navigate wide, dusty roads, and wooden sidewalks frame the commercial heartbeat of a young Colorado territory. Madame Carolista walks the sky, Denver, 1861. In the heart of Denver, 1861, a crowd holds its breath as Madame Carolista dances with gravity. Suspended on a tightrope above the dusty street, she becomes a symbol of courage, spectacle, and resilience. Her performance, captured here in timeless sepia, echoes louder than any applause.
Nevadaville, Colorado, 1860. Nestled in the rugged hills of the Colorado Territory, Nevadaville thrived during the gold rush. Rough-hewn cabins and winding dirt paths reveal a mining town built on grit and hope. This photo captures a frozen breath of frontier life, raw, resilient, and surrounded by silent mountains. Larimer Street, Denver, 1860. Before statehood, before skyscrapers, this was Denver. In 1860, Larimer Street held nothing but wood-frame storefronts and covered wagons. The air was thick with dust and dreams. This image freezes the humble birth of a frontier city destined to shape the American West. Cheyenne Village, 1853. This is a photograph of a Native American village taken by Solomon Nunes Carvalho in 1853. It is one of the earliest photographs of Native Americans ever taken, and is the only surviving daguerreotype from his journey west through America. It shows a view of a Cheyenne village at Big Timbers in what is now Colorado. The photograph is very old and in bad condition, but if you look closely, you can see two Native Americans standing on the left. On the right, drying hides hang on a wooden structure. There are also 4 teepees visible.
History doesn't whisper here. It sings in sepia tones. These images aren't old, they're alive. They remind us that everything great starts with dust, fire, and courage. Colorado's story is more than gold and grit. It's the still heartbeat of a frontier spirit that refuses to fade.
Before Ohio had stadiums and skylines, it had silence, captured in the grain of a photograph. These are the earliest echoes of a state in the making, from flooded towns to funeral processions, from dusty schools to baseball's first swing. Each image tells a truth no textbook ever dared to whisper.
Cleveland City Square, 1900. Streetcars hum, hats tilt, and commerce dances in every direction. Cleveland's public square was already bursting with life at the turn of the century. The towering Soldiers and Sailors Monument anchored the chaos with solemn pride. This was more than a square, it was the city's open heart, beating fast with ambition. Euclid Avenue, Cleveland, 1900. Before the roar of engines and the blur of neon lights, Euclid Avenue whispered elegance. Lined with trees and opulent mansions, this was Cleveland's Millionaire's Row, a silent parade of wealth and quiet ambition. In this stillness, you can almost hear the echo of carriage wheels on cobblestone and lives lived in grandeur. Street Parade, St. Mary's, 1899. Flags waved, boots marched, and windows filled with curious eyes. This 1899 street view from St. Mary's captures a small town in motion, prideful, festive, and woven tightly together. The muddy road may have faded, but the spirit in this photo still walks beside us, carrying Ohio's story one block at a time. Main Street, Piqua, 1899. You can almost hear the horseshoes clatter and the distant ring of a trolley bell. Piqua's Main Street was alive with movement and promise in 1899. Painted signs, telephone wires, and steady footsteps filled the frame. Here, progress wasn't just coming, it was already carving its path through brick, rail, and ambition.
Main Street, Dalton, 1899. Nothing urgent here, just quiet commerce and a slow rhythm you could set a watch to. On the south side of Main Street, locals linger in front of shop windows, their boots tracing lines no map would ever show. Dalton, in 1899, wasn't chasing the future, it was busy living the moment. Flooded streets, Zanesville, 1898. The river didn't knock, it barged in. In 1898, Zanesville's quiet streets became mirrors of panic and survival. Telegraph poles stood helpless in rising water, and station walls reflected skies heavy with fear. This wasn't just a flood. It was a moment when Ohioans remembered how quickly nature can erase the work of men. Memorial Arch, Akron, 1898. Raised for Memorial Day, this grand arch once crowned South Howard Street with honor and silence. Built in 1898, it paid tribute to fallen Civil War soldiers and soon to those lost in the Spanish-American War. Beneath its Latin motto, Akron walked with grief, pride, and the quiet weight of remembrance. Ashtabula Harbor, 1895. Where wooden masts pierced the sky and coal whispered across the waves, Ashtabula Harbor stood as Ohio's gateway to the world. By 1895, this port moved iron and ambition from the Great Lakes to the steel cities beyond. It was the pulse of industry at full sail.
Broad Street, Elyria, 1895. The awnings sway, the signs stand proud, and the dirt road curls forward like a timeline. Elyria's Broad Street, captured in 1895, feels both ordinary and sacred. Every storefront has a story, every window a witness. Nothing here begs attention, yet everything pulls you in, quietly certain of its place in history. Belleville, Ohio, 1894. From atop Switzer's Hill, the village spills out like a quiet thought across the valley. Chimneys rest, fields breathe, and wooden rooftops lean gently into the land. Belleville in 1894 wasn't rushing anywhere, it was simply existing, stitched into the hills like it had always belonged there. A portrait of stillness perfectly paused. Electric streetcar, Toledo, 1893. A hum of current replaced the clip-clop of hooves.
Car 312 waits beneath a web of wires, its silhouette cutting through the quiet of a growing Toledo. This wasn't science fiction, it was Monday morning. The streetcar era had arrived, and with it, a faster pulse in the heart of Ohio. Ohio State's first football team, 1890. No helmets, no roaring crowds, just grit, pride, and striped socks. This was the very first Ohio State football team, posing before their very first game in 1890. They weren't legends yet, but the fire had started. In this photo, you're witnessing the quiet beginning of one of college football's greatest dynasties. Arcade Building, Springfield, 1889. It stretched like a promise, 4 stories of brick, bustle, and dreams. The arcade building wasn't just architecture, it was Springfield's beating commercial core. With shops below and the elegant arcade hotel above, this corner of High and Market buzzed with carriages, cash registers, and confidence. This was where Ohioans met progress face to face. Wheeling Avenue, Cambridge, 1886. The road doesn't just stretch forward, it remembers. Lined with storefronts and leaning trees, Wheeling Avenue captured a town mid-sentence. Horses rest in the shade, boots press dust into memory, and a sign reading leather store swings in the breeze. It's a place between eras where nothing feels rushed, but everything is becoming. Train collision, B&O Railroad, 1886. Iron met iron at full speed. Engines tangled like beasts in mid-charge. This 1886 wreck on the Baltimore and Ohio line didn't just bend steel, it froze time. Onlookers stand like punctuation marks beside the chaos, stunned by the silence that follows disaster. Even the strongest tracks can't always hold direction. Toledo Central High School, 1880. Turrets, towers, and timbered dreams. This wasn't just a school, it was a fortress of thought rising above the banks of the Miami and Erie Canal. Students once crossed muddy roads to sit under this roof and reshape their futures. In the silence of this photo, ambition still lingers in the bricks.
Columbus State Hospital, 1880. A fortress of care or confinement rises from the treetops like a castle for forgotten minds. Columbus State Hospital sprawled across acres, a maze of red brick and hushed corridors. Built with symmetry, but filled with chaos, it reflects a time when architecture tried to contain what no one fully understood. Hall Block, Toledo, 1878. Before it vanished in flames, the Hall Block towered like a crown on St. Clair Street. With rigid windows and bold symmetry, it declared that Toledo was no longer frontier, it was foundation. In this photo, the sky glows faintly behind its outline, as if history itself had paused to admire the structure. Cincinnati Library, 1874. It looked like a cathedral made of paper and dreams. In 1874, the Cincinnati General Library was a monument to knowledge, with walls that breathed ideas. A lone figure scales the ironwork, not to worship, but to read. This wasn't just a library, it was Ohio's mind, built in wood, iron, and wonder. Mineral Springs Resort, Adams County, 1870. Tucked into the hills of West Union, this tranquil retreat promised healing through water and silence. Built in 1867, the Mineral Springs Resort drew weary souls from cities to rest beneath tall trees and sip mineral elixirs. Before it burned in 1923, it offered cabins, calm, and whispered hope in every drop.
Cleveland Forest Cities, 1869. 11 men in matching uniforms, frozen forever in sepia tone. This is Cleveland's first professional baseball team, the Forest Cities of 1869.
With crossed arms, wooden bats, and proud expressions, they weren't just players. They were pioneers of a national obsession still growing. One inning, one generation, one photograph at a time. Geauga County Fire, 1868. All that remained was a shell. The 1868 fire scorched Main Street in Chardon, Ohio, leaving the old Geauga County Courthouse silhouetted against the rubble. Charred beams, toppled fences, and a haunting stillness. This wasn't simply a fire, it was a reset, a brutal clearing before the next chapter could rise. Lincoln's funeral procession, Columbus, 1865. A nation in mourning lined the streets as Abraham Lincoln's casket passed through Columbus. Silent crowds filled every inch of the city's heart. Horse-drawn carriages rolled slowly toward the Capitol, but time itself seemed to halt. Every soul watching, aching, remembering the man who'd held a fractured Union together. Superior Avenue, Cleveland, 1864. A Great Lakes schooner rests in the foreground, but it's the street behind that carries the drama. Superior Avenue climbs the hill like a promise, blanked by warehouses and ambition. The sails are still, the bricks are stern, and Cleveland, half maritime, half metropolis, finds its voice somewhere between waterline and smokestack. The first Union Station, Columbus, 1864. Before highways and airports, this wooden giant pulsed with steam and ambition. Columbus Union Station wasn't just a stop, it was Ohio's beating heart. Built for dreams on rails, it linked lives, towns, and stories across the state. In 1864, progress sounded like a whistle echoing across muddy streets. Election Day, Centerburg, 1863. Boots in dust, voices in motion. On East Main Street, an entire town leans toward the future with ballot in hand. Horses wait, men gather in loose lines, half watching, half debating. The Central House watches quietly from behind them all, an old building with newer decisions echoing through its wooden frame. Martinsburg, West Virginia, Baltimore and Ohio Railroad Shops, 1858. Steam, sweat, and steel defined this day at the Martinsburg shops. Dozens of workers stand proudly beside massive locomotives and coal tenders, the heartbeat of America's first chartered railroad. These were more than trains. They were lifelines, forging paths westward and stitching a young nation together, rail by determined rail. Cleveland, Ohio, Public Square, 1857. A moment frozen in time. This may be the oldest surviving photograph of Cleveland's public square. Horse-drawn carriages, tree-lined streets, and tall brick buildings line a peaceful stretch of early American city life, long before cars or electricity. It's a quiet window into a rapidly changing nation. Downtown Columbus, Ohio, 1857. Seen from the State House cupola, this early aerial photograph reveals a growing city in motion. Horse-drawn buggies wade along 3rd Street, while tree-lined roads and tidy brick homes stretch eastward. In the distance, the State Street School stands, marking a quiet milestone in Columbus's educational and urban development. Antioch College, Yellow Springs, 1853. Rising from Ohio's fields like a cathedral of thought, Antioch College was more than bricks, it was a declaration. Founded in 1852 with Horace Mann at the helm, it welcomed men and women alike in its first class. This photo captures not just a building, but the quiet revolution of education. Union Block, Chillicothe, 1852. No glamour, just grit, timber, and men chasing permanence. This rare glimpse of Chillicothe in 1852 shows the Union Block rising brick by brick. Dust clings to the future as horses wait and workers hammer. It's not a finished building, it's a frozen moment of ambition, captured before the paint even dried. Oxford, Ohio, 1851.
Captured in the heart of town, this daguerreotype frames the quiet strength of Oxford's early days. Dirt roads cradle horse-drawn wagons, while wooden storefronts and brick buildings line the streets with quiet dignity. Signs like jeweler hinted daily life, ambition, and community pride in this young Ohio town.
Daguerreotype view of Cincinnati, the oldest known panorama of an American city, 1848. Before there were pixels, prints, or postcards, there was silver and light. In 1848, two men stood across the Ohio River with a vision no one else had, to capture the soul of a rising American city in one sweeping moment. Using a daguerreotype camera, state-of-the-art for its time, Charles Fontaine and William Porter gave us what we now know as the oldest surviving panoramic photograph of an American city. Their subject? Cincinnati, then a city of steamboats, spires, smokestacks, and ambition. This panorama is more than a photograph. It's a portal. It captures Cincinnati just as it was pivoting from rivertown to regional power. Every plank, every rooftop, every puff of smoke is a frozen heartbeat from a time before electricity, before highways, before noise drowned out stillness. Fontaine and Porter didn't just document a place, they preserved a mood, a temperature, a truth. And now, more than 175 years later, we don't just see it, we feel it. Toledo, Ohio, 1841. Framed by leafless trees, this lone schoolhouse stands as a quiet sentinel of early education. The one-room structure once echoed with the voices of children learning by lamplight. In its stillness, the photo whispers of chalk dust, wooden desks, and the hope of a growing frontier town. They built homes before hope had walls. They stood firm when the water rose. They dreamed beneath oil lamps and paved roads with bare hands. In every shadow of these photos, there's a heartbeat. Ohio wasn't just born, it was carved, framed, and remembered. And now, you've seen how.